What's up, guys? My name is Antonio Miranda, PhD in nutrition, registered dietitian, and most recently CDCES, or CDE as it's formerly known. The reason I made this video was because I was like you a few months ago as I prepared to take my CDE exam, and I got onto YouTube and looked up how to pass the CDE exam, and I was expecting a lot of different people to have posted all their tips and tricks, but I really didn't find too many comprehensive my story of my CDE exam. These are the tips I would recommend without breaking the rules, of course. And I didn't really find that when I was looking on YouTube. Therefore, I made this video and I would summarize it as, what was my experience with the CDE exam? What can you expect? And what are my tips? As you'll see in the following videos, the first part discusses how I felt going into the exam. The second part, how I felt beat up but also excited but brain dead after the exam. And thirdly, and the part that you're most likely looking for, is how did I reflect on the experience and what are the top tips that I would encourage you to pursue in order to do well. And at the end of the video, or actually when I'm going through the tips and tricks, I developed a guide that I wish I would have had prior to taking my exam, where you can actually go to my website and download it. I think it's like $9.99 or something like that, or shoot me an email if you have any questions on it. But the last part of the video is me going through that tip and trick guide to the CDS exam, what study materials I thought were most helpful, what online materials, how I use the ADA standards of care, and also how I utilize AI and ChatGPT to study for the CDCES exam, and thankfully passed on the first try. So hopefully you're here for learning and to make life easier on you, and that's why I'm here too. So again, my name is Antonio Miranda. Enjoy the video. It's a bit long, but it goes piece by piece, how I felt before the exam, after the exam, and how I reflected on it, and the tips that I would encourage you to do. Thank you so much. Well wishes on your exam, and I could see it in you now. You're a CDCES already, you just don't know it. Believe in yourself, and thank God. Have a great day. All right, part one, how I felt prior to the CDCES exam. Right, good morning, everybody. It is CDE or CDCES exam day, formerly Certified Diabetes Educator exam day. Just wanted to share some of my thoughts before I go in this morning. I just went into the building just to get familiar with it. My test is at 12:30. It's currently 11:45. I'll go in at 12, hoping to start a little bit early and get out a little bit early and be done with it. In terms of how I feel, just like anybody else, just some tricks of the trade that I've picked up over the years from being in school for 10 years is that it's okay to be nervous. In all honesty, this morning I feel totally at peace because really, having been through everything, the implications of this aren't very much. I'm doing this to better myself, but there isn't if you fail this, you're gonna not make it out of freshman year like I was struggling 10 years ago. But anyways, just a little bit of a pep talk for people who struggle with test anxiety. I've known people with test anxiety. Thankfully, I do not have it, but I still get nervous. But I'll give you 3 tips that always help me before an exam. So number 1 is to know that the hay is in the barn, which is a metaphor for you've already done the work, you've already studied, you've already looked through the flashcards. Don't psych yourself out the day before, an hour before. The hay is in the barn. The hay or the work, the thoughts are up here. You're going to be ready. Number 2, it's okay to be nervous. The best athletes in the world get nervous before a big sporting event. Fighters get nervous, basketball players get nervous, singers get nervous. It doesn't matter how great you are. If we reframe our thoughts and remind ourselves that nerves are our body trying to give us some adrenaline and some energy, and it's okay. They're there to help us. And that way it prevents them from taking control of us. So number 1, the hay is in the barn. Number 2, it's okay to be nervous. Just ride the wave. 5 minutes ago, I was nervous. Right now, I feel totally at peace, and I'm talking to you. And if I'm nervous right before or during, deep breath. It's a normal part of the process. And lastly, thank God. Thank God for another day, and God's will be done. If I pass the test, which I fully expect and am confident and humbly confident, because why stress about it, then great. Thank God for helping me through it. And if I don't pass it, then guess what? It's God telling me that there's something else I need to learn better so I can better serve my patients in the future. Anyways, those are my pre-exam thoughts. Well, we can talk a little bit about how I prepared and just a brief information. I probably should have studied a bit more. I crammed a lot this last week, but I've been working full time, and I just want to get it over with. And yesterday I took a practice exam, took it easy, and I took a couple practice exams leading up to this. But anyways, the hay's in the barn. Time to get going and see y'all on the other side. Part 2, how I felt after the CDCES exam and did I pass? Woo, just got done. I passed. It's quite the exhausting test, if we're going to be honest. Because just to give you the rundown, my exam was scheduled for 12:30. I went in at 11:45, hoping I could start at 12 and hopefully get out by 3 or 4. It's a 4-hour test. And so I get in there and their system is down. And so instead of starting at 12, they tell us we have 60 minutes in order to get all the exams up and running, because there were a lot of people, people taking random exams, including myself. And they said we have 60 minutes to get the system booted and running again, or if not, we're going to have to reschedule. Which thankfully I'm not a type A, but if you're a type A person, you're probably freaking out because you've worked this hard and you don't want to have to do it. For me, I'm a competitive type B, so what I cared most about was having to study again. If I had to retake it in a week, I dreaded that. But nope. But anyways, looking at the score, you get a little sheet here. They kind of laugh because they have they take a picture of you, and I gave a thumbs up because I honestly thought they pulled me in with probably 1 or 2 minutes, like 2 minutes left in the 60 to get the system running. And they had tried to get me in multiple times, and finally for the 4th time they asked me to take my picture, and I just gave a thumbs up because I'm like, well, I'm not going to be able to take the exam anyways because time's pretty much up. And they said, oh, it went through, go ahead and get started. And that's how it started. So I passed. What you'll get is this report. I know people don't like to share their scores for good or for bad, but I'm going to be transparent. So you have passed this examination. Your score is 80 scaled score units. So I think that's out of 100 when they scale it. Your score is 80 scaled score units or 143 correct answers. The passing score is 70 scaled score units or 125 correct answers. And that being that I think it's 175 of the 200 questions or 180 of the 200 questions are included, and 20 or 25 of them are practice. Sorry, I'm brain dead. You could see the bags under my eyes. And yeah, it breaks it down. Content area, assessment of the diabetes continuum, intervention for diabetes continuum, and disease management. I got 26 out of 28 for disease management, 71 out of 88 for intervention, and then assessment of the diabetes continuum, 46 out of 59. But anyways, guys, what I really would like to share is that really the hardest part of the exam is when you first start out, your brain is kind of on overload. Maybe that was probably my fault because I didn't take very many practice exams. I never sat down and took one in peace and quiet, which that was not a rookie mistake, but I just didn't feel like doing it. I've been through it before with my RD exam, my GRE, whatever. So that's tip number 1 I would give, would be do multiple practice exams if you have the money or if you can, or if you can, because really the approach I took was, I've just been in this for so long, I'm going to read as much about diabetes, the national standards, the ADCES booklet with the guides and education and Quizlets, and those are all great. But really what I found most difficult about the test is you get short answer questions and you get long answer questions, you get image questions talking about different assessment technique or whatever, without getting into the major details. So you need to make sure your brain is prepared for that. Make sure it's prepared for sorry, it was a long test. Make sure that it's prepared to answer those long questions, because honestly, the last 100 of my exam, last 100 questions were much better, I'd say, than the first 100, because the first 20 to 30, you're kind of maneuvering and your brain's stuck on questions that resemble what you took in the practice exam, but you have to remind yourself that this is a new exam, that just because it looks like the other exam, don't go with the instantaneous answer, stuff like that. So you're kind of working through that mental fog and a bit of adrenaline. My blood pressure was elevated the whole time because, I mean, that's just how I am. I take the test seriously, and even though I was relaxed going into it, when I'm taking an exam, my pulse is usually higher. And in terms of specific areas, right, we can't go into questions, and plus it's hard to remember out of 200. But yeah, I would say the hardest aspect of the exam is the fact that the questions that are more so, which of these questions should you ask the patient first given this scenario? Which of these questions or statements should you tell the patient given X scenario? Because those, again, you can't really study or prepare for those. I feel like a lot of those are intuitive no matter what people will say. I think I could definitely figure out the questions that were the first trial questions, because I would read them and say, man, that's phrased or worded very oddly, and it could potentially confuse people taking the exam, and it confused me. So that's how, at some point, don't just stay on the questions forever. Once you get into your groove, you start going pretty fast. Really, for me, remember, you have 4 hours for 200 questions, so about a minute per question. At 1 hour, I was barely at like 40 questions. Again, because dealing with the brain fog, dealing with the nerves, dealing with the kind of trying to get into the groove. But then from there, I'd say about from question 80 and especially 100, at 100, I took a 2-minute bathroom break. And that really helped, because from 100 to 200, I think I got most of those answers right, because the fear had subsided and the adrenaline had subsided. And at the very end of the exam, I went to the beginning of the exam, and I was just really low in my confidence on those initial questions. So I went back and edited a few of them because I had like 20 minutes left. But at that point, I said, I've been in here for 4 hours. I'm brain dead. If I start changing questions now, I trust myself more 4 hours ago than I do now. So take that with a grain of salt, however you feel it. If you're just really nervous at the start of the exam, maybe take your time and go back and review, or maybe you can go back at the halfway point and review and then move forward. Maybe that would have been a better idea for me. But again, that comes at the cost of more urgency for the last half. But yeah, in terms of specifics, it's really hard because it's literally everything together. Questions on the weird, like exenatide, low battery, sorry. On like exenatide, I can't get into the specifics, but I mean, that one's one I didn't really study. And oddly enough, there weren't as many medication questions as I expected. Really, and I guess I got a good batch of questions, but I was expecting so many more of confusing contraindication questions and know the specific amounts of all the medications. And other than no metformin's contraindicated with renal, know that the SGLT2s are encouraged with renal as well, when to use the GLP-1s with cardiovascular, and knowing the side effects of the SGLT2s. Other than that, I mean, the medication ones are really straightforward. And I don't know how you would prepare for the exam again, given that, because a lot of the questions aren't super straightforward. You can typically narrow it down to 2. And even for the 2 best answers, you can argue one way or the other. More questions than I expected on program management. What are the components of diabetes education? When should you do a needs assessment and how should you do it? There's a group of, it'll give you on just one question. And again, I can't get into the specifics, but it'll give you patients with different conditions, durations of diabetes, type 1, type 2, age, and medication. Say, what should you do? Make another group class, move patient 1 to another class that's specific for different medication, blah, blah, blah. So stuff like that I wasn't expecting. And again, CDCES, don't get mad at me. I'm not giving away specifics. I'm just showing the visual that we've seen in all the practice exams. Yeah, so for now I'm tired, and really my best advice is work on managing that initial kind of brain overload of just reading the question. Practice being able to immerse into the what's it called, the exam faster, and then just study as hard as you can. Not a crazy amount, but for me, I've always believed in the subconscious brain, where I superficially don't always know the 100% this is the answer, but I trust that my subconscious brain will lean me in the direction of the better answer more than I could consciously make. And that's always worked for me in undergrad. And I always wore a Superman shirt on my exam days. But other than that, guys, yeah, what I would focus on more, but again, it just depends on your deck of questions. I would focus more on the management. How would I say it? I would focus more on understanding what to do with patients under certain circumstances. So with kids that drink, with kids that come in with their parents, with gestational diabetes, as opposed to obsessing so much on the medications, because you're going to need to know those anyways. But yeah, in summary, focus a lot more on the problem solving and what to do given the different diagnostics and age and all of that. And I didn't have a single, I think I might have had one, but I think not a single question on the statins and cholesterolemia. And because my practice exams had a lot of those questions, the ones through ADCES, the practice exam through ADCES. That practice exam had a lot of questions on the management of cardiovascular disease and atherosclerosis, ASCVD, sorry. And it had like probably 10 or 20 questions out of 200 on those practice exams. We're dealing with which statin, which ACE inhibitor, which lipid lowering medication, etc., etc. And I really was stressing on learning those, and hydrophilic and hydrophobic statins and high intensity, lower intensity statins. I didn't have a single one of those. So again, just practice more of your test taking techniques more than anything, and take a bathroom break to regather yourself. And yeah, it was hard to be there waiting in limbo to see if I had to take my exam. But if I think of anything else, I will add another short video, but I think that's it. It's 3 minutes plus 12 minutes, and we did it. Thank God. Never have to take it again. Good luck to you. Love y'all all. Part 3, study outline, study methods, as well as tips and tricks for the CDE exam. Guys, here is the study template or guide that I developed. Let me give you the best tips that I have. You can find this on my website, which I'll get to at the end. CDS Study Guide. To begin, this guide was used to pass CDCES exam in 2023. The knowledge that we have on diabetes is going to incrementally change, but it shouldn't change all that drastically. So this guide should be pretty good for a few years. And as you'll see in just a second, I'll show you which resources you can use and how to get the updated version. To begin, here's what I use. In terms of the hard copy materials, guys, these are the items that I actually use hard copy or printed out. So number one, the ADCES Diabetes Care and Education Curriculum. That to me is the number one helpful piece of study material that I had. I already had it at work. Our work had already purchased it from the previous year. So thankfully that saved me, I think, a little bit over $100. So maybe see if your work can obtain that for you. If not, your finances are your finances, but it's up to you. But that's a very good resource. I felt as if 80% of the material in the exam mimicked how this curriculum, this right here, was was written. So the terminology, not necessarily the terminology, but the language was very similar, which helped me ease into the exam. And this is good just to have for your work in any outpatient diabetes setting anyways. See if they can obtain it for you. Another one that's important to have in clinic and that helped me with studying with this was this quick guide to diabetes medications. It's got a lot of beautiful graphs. For copyright, I can't put those in here, but I printed off documents where I would put those algorithms or titration algorithms and all that information, which patients under which A1C conditions and with which histories are would benefit more from an increase in insulin, a decrease in insulin if they're older to avoid polypharmacy or simplification of their medication. A lot of that information is in here, and a lot of us struggle with medication and understanding it and not that we can advise, not that we can prescribe, but when to advise a change in medication or to better understand. So these are the top two that I would do: the ADCES Diabetes Care and Education Curriculum, as well as the Quick Guide to Medications. And both of those are on the ADCES website. Next, in terms of material that you can print off for free, the ADA Standards of Care are great to print off. I put all of these together into a binder, and it's 1 through, I believe, 16 or 19 chapters. And these are updated every year by the ADA. I compiled, you'll see here in the next few pages, I compiled what I thought were the key points for a lot of these chapters, but it is important to read through it thoroughly, maybe at least once, and highlighting your weaknesses and understanding what your strengths are as well. So the ADA Annual Standards of Care are very helpful. Let me actually pull those up. ADA Standards of Care. Sorry, I thought I had these pulled up. ADA Standards of Care 2023. This is what they're going to look like. And just if you've never used them before, if you're newer at this, you should look at these every year. They update every single year, and you can, for example, let's just go through one of them here. Let's go to everybody's favorite medications, which I believe is, yes, pharmacological approaches, chapter 9. And just to give you an idea of how I studied it, open the PDF, print it all off. It's got the core points up here of the chapter, the key recommendations, but you can use the references to look at the rationale for these recommendations as well if you're interested in looking deeper into it, like I always am. But what's very helpful are these graphs, not necessarily this one, but they have these diagrams and graphs showing right here, for example, simplified overview of indications for beta cell replacement therapy. So that one's one. This is probably the key one. See if I can rotate it. Yeah, I would print this and study it. Use of glucose lowering medications. And that medication guide even simplifies this further. But it's pretty straightforward. Which medications are typically used and recommended and indicated with atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, with congestive heart failure, with chronic kidney disease. And you see here SGLT2 for CKD, which is a newer recommendation that's evolved and come to be over the last couple of years. GLP-1s, depending on, yeah, here we go, GLP-1 receptor agonist for obesity, cardiovascular disease, and diabetes. And even over here, the more common oral medications and when they're indicated. And it's got just great information. So you don't reinvent the wheel. Don't feel like you have to draw all of it out again. And here's another one, and I'll get back to the material in just a second, where this one is talking about, yeah, if injectable therapy is needed to reduce A1C. These are great, guys. I would highly recommend using these graphs. And that's how I use it. I'm just kind of giving you a sneak peek of how you can study all this material. In terms of online resources, because we'll get back to what's actually in the study guide in a second, list of online resources. ADCES has this CDE exam prep self-assessment. If you're an ADCES member, you can log into your account and go to My Online Learning. In there, you'll find the CDE exam prep self-assessment. This was highly beneficial for me because there are others out there, so I don't have experience with all the other practice exams. But this one made by ADCES has 200 questions. You can take it in exam mode, so all 200 at once, which is the same number as the ones in the CDCES exam, or practice mode, which is the one that I utilize the most, taking it in practice mode and initially going slowly and learning about my strengths and weaknesses and reading the feedback that they give you after you get each question right or wrong. My mistake, as you could tell in how I felt in the exam experience or post-exam experience that I just put, my mistake was only taking the practice exam in learning mode or in assessment mode and not in actual practice all 200 at once mode. I can't remember if I took it maybe once, but I think I might have just done practice mode and said, all right, well, let's just take it. But really having these practice exams and maybe taking it a day prior or a week prior, 2 weeks prior, and getting into that ambiance of being able to take a long exam like that. Take it in practice mode. Mometrix is another one. I can pull this up. I Google just free sort of CDE practice questions, and I believe there are 40 questions on here. You'll find that these are unofficial. This one, at least, the Mometrix, and a lot of these other ones are unofficial. If it's not made by ADA or ADCES, you're kind of taking a chance, but I would still use it as a study supplement, right? Because it's additional to what the formal study material are. And what you'll learn is after you've studied enough, you realize that some of these practice questions from Mometrix and other ones that are Quizlet, you say, well, that's actually not 100% accurate, and they're not really understanding the concept. You become smarter than these tests that are made by unofficial sources. But again, I took that 40 question practice exam, I think a day or a couple days prior, and it just kind of eased my nerves without having to take the massive practice exam all over again. Quizlet has a lot of great, I took my exam February 2023. There were Quizlets in January 2023 from people who took it a few months prior. And here in 2023, I see someone made another one for February 2023. You're not going to find anything verbatim, right? Because none of us are trying to cheat the system and cheat ADCES or ADA. But you'll find that people will put their study material on there, and that's very beneficial for many people. So Quizlet, it's very useful. I think I used it initially just to start getting the engines warmed up for my studying, but at the end, I didn't really use it as much, rather more the practice exam and the ADCES. Here's a tip you probably won't find anywhere else, but it's really the evolution of our studying. I highly recommend using ChatGPT. Again, it's unofficial. It's not made by the ADA or ADCES. If you don't know what ChatGPT is, it's where you can type in a question and say, explain diabetes to me. It'll give you paragraphs as much as you want. And then, because it's just a bunch of information from the internet all plugged into artificial intelligence, and it'll answer your questions. Unfortunately, the site was down when I tried to make this video, but you can go onto YouTube and look up how to study utilizing ChatGPT, not for the CDE exam, but people from a variety of places showing how they utilize ChatGPT to study. But I'll just give you a good example, guys, of how I used it. I was weak in my understanding of diabetic ketoacidosis. I see mostly type 2s, not as many type 1s. Now I've seen many more type 1s, so I feel highly confident in it. But at the time, I was rusty on my DKA understanding. So I typed into ChatGPT, explain DKA to me. It gave me DKA. And then I typed in, provide me with the relevant laboratory results that are indicative of DKA, as well as what the normal ranges are. And again, you have to take it with a grain of salt, use official PubMed and ADA official documentation, but it would just populate it instantly for you. And you can ask deeper and deeper questions. So even though it's not 100% reliable, it shows you how to process the information where your knowledge should be going. Same thing, a final example I'll give is, about beta blockers and their influence on perceiving hypoglycemia. Many of us don't know that. But I think I took a practice exam. I can't remember what it was, but long story short, I realized that people on beta blockers, for some, are less sensitive to experience or to feeling or detecting hypoglycemia. And I said, well, why? So I asked ChatGPT, why are beta blockers influential on perceived hypoglycemia or hypoglycemic responses? And it gave me that. The beta blockers are able to block receptors. Beta blockers have to deal with adrenaline receptors in the body that are typically used to prevent high blood pressure, right? Or for someone who has stress. And therefore, since it's an adrenaline hormone-based receptor, and again, I'm not an expert on it, I'm not a cardiologist, given that, and that hypoglycemia targets certain receptors that are impacted by adrenaline. It's an adrenaline response that is hypoglycemia. And it showed how beta blockers and the receptors to adrenaline and related to those adrenaline receptors and the typical hypoglycemic response. And I found that very interesting, and I could have found that in ADA or by looking through the references, but ChatGPT summarized it really quickly. And if I wanted to officially learn it, I could go to learn in official resources such as ADA and ADCES. And that's the beauty of ChatGPT. It just helps you think faster and learn faster, and then you can formally and officially learn it through the proper educational material that you as a healthcare professional know where to find it. There are some additional tips that I'll put in here that you can skim through. I put how I stayed organized in the study material that I obtained. I put in here my 4-week study plan without making this video too much longer because it's already probably almost half an hour. Week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. I only studied for 4 weeks. Most people prefer more, not because you're not smart enough, but because it gives you peace of mind. For odd circumstances, I had to take mine in a month. So I took it in a month and I passed it on the first try. And I'm not the smartest guy in the world. I try my best to study intelligently. Here's my study guide. All of this you can download, and I think I have it for $9.99. I might put a discount on it, a seasonal discount for like $7.99 or something. But I just made this to help people, and through my experience, just how people make their Quizlets to help others out. So here's some information on DKA that I got from ChatGPT, and I even asked it, give me a sample question. And then I put, which of the following lab values is most consistent with the presentation of diabetic ketoacidosis? And you can learn, so you can get that right on the exam. And here we go. So for my studying, I copied and pasted the ADA standards of care. Again, this is not a comprehensive study guide, everybody. This is more of a study outline to help you. And I write on here why I put some chapters in different orders. So I have chapter 9, pharmacological approaches to glycemic treatment. And there are links to most of the chapters, not on all. But again, they're all under ADA here. I put some of the core concepts in the summary of different chapters that I thought were the key takeaways. I wasn't able to just copy and paste everything from ADCES due to copyright, of course, and to not do illegal stuff. But you see, I put pictures in here. I put YouTube videos. What is a dilated eye exam exactly? Well, what exactly are we looking for in foot examinations, peripheral artery disease? There's a really good video on that. Again, this study guide isn't going to guarantee 100% what your grade will be, but hopefully by studying this from someone who's passed the exam, it gives you peace of mind that you're on the right track. And here you go. Most of these chapters I put on here, what my key takeaways were also. And then at the very end, so what I did was I started with the pharmacological, with the medication, then I went through some of the material that I understood the least, and then I ended with the material that I understood the most. Focus on your weaknesses, not just your strengths. And at the very end, I put my tips for nerves, and also afterwards dealing with imposter syndrome and all that also. So that's the guide. We talked about all this stuff. You can go to Antonio. Actually, let me show you how to get there. If you go to antonionutrition.com, if it'll load, antonionutrition.com, CDCES study guide. And here you can purchase the download Word or PDF just to serve as a study supplement or outline for you. Give you some information on there, the disclaimer. And lastly, I wanted to finish, guys, with kind of the different projects that I work on. I'm very passionate about diabetes, specifically among Hispanics, and just in general. So if you have patients or if you have anybody that would benefit, I have 30-minute online health courses that are just the best information that I could give if I had 30 minutes with someone to just give them all the information that'll help them. I have one for diabetes, pre-diabetes, and for weight loss or weight management. I even have a comprehensive, I believe it's 4-hour diabetes one, and the 30-minute ones are like $45 if you have any family members that would benefit from that. I do speaking engagements, and then so we talked about where to go for the study guide. And then lastly, if you work at a diabetes center, you work with a lot of patients of Hispanic origin or of the Hispanic ethnicity. I make these, and again, antonionutrition.com/merch. I do these totes with Spanish sayings and La buena comida es la mejor medicina, or let food be thy medicine. These hats and these shirts that can be utilized as motivational and as educational tools for patients. And it's, if you have any further questions on it, just email me. My whole dissertation, my PhD, was on utilizing Spanish sayings to deliver information in a behavioral, motivating manner to Hispanic specifically. And that's a little bit about me. Hopefully you enjoyed that video. If you have any questions, shoot me an email. Of course, I might not get to all the emails, but hopefully that helped with your study material. If you ever need a guest speaker, I've got that, the health courses and all that. I've got some research articles if y'all are interested. Let me exit out of here to say an official farewell. Hopefully this helped you guys out. And in you, I see a CDCES, a future CDE or CDCES, however you want to call it. Remember that nerves are normal, that you're smart enough, you're good enough, you're a healthcare professional for a reason, and you don't have to be an expert in everything. Just pass the exam, and I think you're going to do great. You already do great with your patients. Your patients believe in you. Why wouldn't you believe in yourself, okay? So take care. God bless. Best wishes and prayers for you on your exam and for your family, and as well as for you and your patients. All right. Good luck.